Everybody. Today is October 3rd, and this is the October session of the Planning Commission. It is now 5:30, so I'd like to make a motion to open this meeting. Do I have a second? Thank you, Jeannie. All in favor? Thank you. So the agenda is posted on the village website, though for just to accommodate on the schedule, we'll skip straight to item number 4 on the schedule on the agenda, which is the climate impact and financial risk and property insurance renewal, which has been an issue for residents of late. I thought it was a really important topic, and we're lucky to have tonight via video link Rebecca St. Clair from McBride Consulting. Rebecca is a village resident. She has been working on planning issue throughout Long Island and Suffolk County, is very knowledgeable on these issues, so I thought we'd spend half an hour to present. Not so much the climate impact, but the implication of climate impact and the financial risk associated with it. So thank you, Rebecca, for being with us today. Appreciate the time and your timeline. We only have half an hour, so let's go into it. Thank you. Floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm happy to speak with the Planning Commission today. I think it's a great opportunity, and obviously with the leadership of Mayor Menger, you have a comprehensive plan in place that addresses it recognizes some climate planning. You also have existing studies like coastal erosion studies and FEMA elevation studies that the village has done, which is all very important. But I'd say the issue that's really top of mind, and also to consider what's happening, globally, but especially in the U.S. right now with hurricanes, is the issue of property insurance. And so what's happening there, and how can we, I think, or how could I help support the Planning Commission in your efforts to help mitigate some of these risks for residents and also business owners, right? Everyone does or should have property insurance. Some folks will also have flood insurance. What is happening right now is that when you are denied flood insurance, when you're denied property insurance, it actually counts against the value of your asset. And so either being repeatedly denied or having your property insurance go up is actually lowering the value of your property, whether it's residential or commercial. And I think that, it was stated today, there was a Newsday article, I don't know if everyone saw, about the Federal Reserve releasing their flood risk for the tri-state area report. And in the bottom of that article, it says, these property insurance threats happening are going to start to devalue assets. And I think that's a little bit late to the game. There's already modeling that shows there's a devaluation of assets at the first denial of property insurance. And so looking at climate adaptation strategies and how either through building code or design or through other mitigation efforts, we can lower the risk. I don't know if you're familiar with what happened to flood insurance in 2022, but there was a risk rating adjustment to the federal system that provides subsidized federal flood insurance to most folks. And so there are areas, of course, that only have private flood insurance now in the United States, but that risk rating went from evaluating essentially tranches of assets in certain areas, mostly low-lying flood areas, to an individual risk rating of a property. So now it doesn't matter necessarily if you're sitting within a band of risk, it matters individually what your actual risk is. And also just to note that most folks, because most of us have mortgages, have property insurance. Flood insurance is only required for folks that are deemed in this certain zones of the floodplain. So if you're not buying, options on flood insurance for your property, there's a reality that you could still have a flood situation. Property insurance, your regular insurance that you have in your home, is not going to cover a catastrophic flooding event. It might cover a flooding event if your boiler breaks or something else inside the home, but it's not going to attribute to your repairs from any of the flooding we're seeing through superstorms, hurricanes, or other tropical storms. So I guess, again, my and I appreciate you mentioning my role in planning and economic development. I've also worked through at the state level and the county level 3 different disaster recovery scenarios, just to give context to the funding that's available and how these things are typically addressed. I worked through 2008 on the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, where we had a subprime foreclosure crisis, and that was an economic crisis. Then in 2012 with Superstorm Sandy, and then just in 2020 under the ARPA funding that came in for COVID recovery. So you have, a catastrophic weather recovery, sandwiched between 2 incredible economic recoveries that the state had to go through. And so in each one of those, there was a homeowner impact. In the first, there's a subprime foreclosure situation that's essentially devaluing assets. Then we have the Superstorm Sandy, which also impacts the value of assets and what mitigation was done. And then we had COVID, where assets were yet again impacted because people didn't have funding to either pay their mortgage or rent, right? So there's been challenges to real estate throughout these different issues. And so I think from the perspective of the village, and I'll talk just a little bit about other things we can be doing to address climate adaptation sort of as a community, but I think, the studies that were done, coastal erosion, FEMA, were done in 2013 and 15, it may be time to look back at those. And the modeling that's available now for actual risk is far different than what we had in 2012. And in 2012, I spent most of my time working on evaluating areas that needed to be bought out permanently from rebuilding. And we had to make decisions using historical floodplain maps, sandy inundation, as well as the modeling that was available then to determine what areas should be rebuilt. And so obviously not leading with buyouts as an overall solution, but just saying that the risk tools available now to evaluate real estate and where we're citing things and how the planning reviews are done. I mean, I think there's a great opportunity here to incorporate some of that technology into the work that the village is doing to help protect residents. But I also think there's a lot of funding opportunity. Every time there is a disaster situation, there's a federal declaration, there's an ability for the village to apply for mitigation funding to do planning work. There's also EPA funding available for communities to do climate adaptation planning. And there's also a state office of resilient communities that you can access funding for housing individuals. So, whether the role of the village is the code setting or whether it is the boundary setting for development or it's helping residents access funding to mitigate these issues, again, I just would like to, as a resident, be here to support the Planning Commission if they choose to take these on within the broader implementation of the comprehensive plan, the code changes, and then any climate action plans that you want to undertake.
Rebecca, thank you for that. We covered a lot of ground. I got a lot of questions, but let me just start with what you said about the 2012 modeling that was done ensuing the 2013 FEMA, I guess the FEMA elevation plan that was done, and there was a second plan you mentioned, which I failed to mark down, that was done, I think, in 2013, and you're suggesting that both of those need to be updated as they are over a decade old. Is that what you're saying?
I think that the modeling that's been done since then, the tools that we have available are far beyond. In 2012, when we were dealing with like the immediate aftermath of Superstorm Sandy, we were cobbling together like different mapping mechanisms that were available. And today, it's advanced so greatly, and the investment in climate studies and the data available has advanced so much that I don't think it would be, let's say, a high cost to the village per se to have these models refreshed based on what's currently available. And also just to sort of say, we look so much at coastal erosion and coastal inundation and flooding then, and a lot of what's happening in New York is actually happening from other water bodies, right? It's happening from streams and riverbeds, and the flooding that's happening that's devastating. So just to say, it could use a refresh. And there are also like risk modeling tools that the village itself could adopt. There's subscription-based risk modeling to look at what was done or to look at individual properties. Another thing that the village might want to undertake is looking at your own buildings and doing a risk evaluation of those public assets to see where you might have risks and how you could address them through other public funding mechanisms.
Okay, so let's assume for a minute that the village engages in this refresh of these two sort of verticals with new technology and modeling. Once we got that, and however it's funded either out of a budget or accompanied by grants, as you're suggesting, what do we do with that? So we've got these new models, we've got this new data. What do we do with it once we got it? What
So
actions?
the two studies, you have the coastal erosion study, and then you have this FEMA analysis, right? So you have these two different studies which complement each other, right? Which is looking towards the future and how we predict inundation, more specifically from water. We should also be worried about wind, but more specifically from water. And so the recommendations in the second study about FEMA elevations and how to address various building components, those would lead into building code changes. So you would take both of those pieces and you'd be able to inform any building codes to address issues. It could be materials. The village is a little bit unique than other South Shore communities I've worked in. You don't have, let's say, the density of the canals that you might in like a town of Babylon, right? You don't have areas that are inherently more risky. You have most of your high value residential assets are set back from the water in such a way. It's not like a fire island, for example. So your built environment's a little bit different than other areas that are more high risk. And so I think your mitigation efforts, will sort of be less in that way. We're not necessarily elevating homes, 15 or 20 feet in the air, and we're not necessarily buying out properties, but we can bring in materials and do other work to help mitigate impacts.
Okay, so building code change recommendations could emanate from the Planning Commission's work following the update of the coastal erosion plan and the FEMA elevation studies by remodeling. What else could there be that would benefit village residents that we could think about, other than those building code recommendations
Sure.
that we could come up with?
I mean, outside of the sort of the built environment, I'd say one thing that, and of course this summer was extremely relevant, is that the heat waves that we're having, we need to have some type of cooling plan, and we don't need to stand alone in that. We should certainly work with our county partners, but I think some type of cooling plan, in some type of designated area for seniors, and other communities, and I'm granted some of these communities are further south, they, instead of having like this traditional sort of water fountain in your community, that there's always access to chilled water, that there's outdoor water coolers. I mean, there's different things that I think you could do in order to address sort of the broader community. But I think too, existing resources that exist, let's say at the state level for residents who have homes who are repetitively flooded. I don't know if folks are accessing that. I don't have a good sense of some of the risk experienced sort of by residents through typical storms. I mean, I have experience on certain streets where there is sort of excessive flooding and other drainage issues. And so, I mean, that sort of steps over into other infrastructure impacts, which is, how are we looking at infrastructure through this climate adaptation lens? And are we addressing the way the streets are structured, the street, what do they call it? I apologize. When you're regrading the street and raising the street, all of these other pieces that are considered sort of maintenance, and how is the village conducting that, and are they putting properties at risk through those activities? I mean, I think we've talked about obviously bringing in a sewer and doing other drainage and wastewater projects are critically important to addressing the issues through climate change as well.
All right, that's very helpful. Actually, just a parenthesis in our building code. A rate of 2 inches of rain per hour is what a property needs to be rated to be self-containing with its wells, etc., to keep the water. And we now have witnessed enough situations where it's been way beyond 2 inches per hour. And so that could be things to look at. I guess that's what you're suggesting.
Yeah, a sort of a holistic approach. I mean, you're already going to be doing road repairs. You're already doing building. These are things that the village is already undertaking. And so, if we can look at them through the lens of how are we planning out, 10 to 20 years from now, I think is important. And I don't know that we're taking a step back to take a step forward. I think these steps can be taken at the same time. I just noticed on the rest of your agenda here, you also have the cell tower listed, and I just wanted to I mean, one of the things that's getting reported out of Hurricane Helene is that a lot of the loss of life and the delays in response is that they didn't have their cell towers situated in a way that was let's call it resilient, or perhaps they were from buildings, but just the cell tower issue, especially since we have so many folks that are not using landlines anymore, nor would it matter in a complete power loss. But I think I just say the visual inconvenience of seeing a cell tower versus the benefit to life, I think, is incredible, and so that's been noted clearly in what's just happened.
Yeah. So you raise a super good point, Rebecca. There. So two things. It's interesting, and this is just a side note. Eileen was Category 4, and our last hurricane here of that magnitude or greater was in 1938. We talk about this to be a 100-year event. Well, it's only 14 plus years out. And so first observation. A lot of the wind towers that are being put out, Block Island and elsewhere, are Category 3 rated. We've had discussions on Project Diamond for the cell tower, and correct me if I'm wrong, Michelle, I think we brought this up, and it was a Category 3 rating as well. Meaning that if you have a hurricane of the substance of like we just had last week in the southeast of the country, that tower is going to be gone. And what are we going to do from an emergency perspective for our residents to be able to work on some of this thing? Now, I know the police department has gotten a satellite connection for their 911 equipment now, which is great. They started this last year. So in the event of loss, the 911 center could still be operating and have connection to satellite. They're using Starlink, I think. The question is, if there's no cell tower and nobody can make a phone call to the 911, it's not of great use. So you raise a good point, and it's kind of circular, but we need to think about that. And since we're going to have public hearings on first responder receptions and communication issues over the next few weeks and months on that Project Diamond. Hopefully, these will be issues and questions that residents will raise for that to be robust in the case of an emergency of that stature. So, thanks for bringing it up. I have some. So, you've raised and we Q&A on some strategic questions. I wanted to get to the tactical, but before I go there, I want to ask my colleagues, the Planning Commission, if they have any other strategic questions on the topic that they might want to ask Rebecca.
Yeah, one curious observation is: have you seen what's the variance of increases in underwritings and droppage rates, both in commercial and residential assets in Suffolk County? Have we started to do some collection of data on what's been renewed, albeit with an increased premium, both on residential, commercial assets, and then government assets? Has any analysis been done thus far?
So there's actually been a lot of analysis done about the insurance market. I can only speak to it anecdotally because most of the reporting was voluminous, right, on what's happening in trends. But anecdotally, I think I've also heard from some of my actual neighbors that we all sort of received cancellation notices at a similar time. It's something that I've actually experienced, right? And then when you go back, they're asking for double that insurance. Now, I don't know if you've also noticed your increase in your car insurance, right? So all of these things and the pools, the funding pools behind all of these insurances are tied together, right? So you have companies like Allstate that have really completely pulled out of the residential component. I think of all of New York now. I know they're definitely on Long Island. But they just sort of did like a cash call and requested that a large number of their folks who have car insurance pay their insurance like their entire year's premium up front, right? When things like that happen, it's alarming. And I think for a lot of us who are fortunate to say, okay, I'm just writing another check that this month, that's one thing. But to a family or let's say an elderly person on a fixed income, to receive a $6,000 bill, out of the blue that must be paid in full before your insurance is canceled, it is not only shocking, but it can be financially devastating. So I'd be happy to share reports I've looked at the trends in the insurance market with the commission. But I'd say anecdotally, again, a lot of us can rise to the occasion if there's these financial changes in our life. There's a lot of folks in our community who just can't. And we really should be concerned about what happens to them as well in these situations with these drastic increases.
Have you seen a big spill into the secondary surplus lines market now that a lot of the primary underwriters have been dropping the various theories of operation? I recall from our own experiences after 9/11, I mean, the primary underwriting market in general just got dropped and the surplus market just took off. But the catch-22 with that was, as you know, it was basically, forgive me for saying, a loan shark insurance underwriting. It's either take it or leave it with an insane amount of deductible along the way. And I know in our case, in our properties, both in the city and here, we pivoted into Lloyd's of London predominantly because most primary underwriters are just not underwriting high value assets.
That's exactly what's happening. And they were just discussing it this morning, what's happening in Florida, who's remaining in the market. And I think we should be watching the coastline and the markets to sort of see what our future is going to look like. So, yeah, I think you're right. And I think I don't think I would hesitate to use the word sort of loan shark. But again, like a lot of us can we can financially survive these challenges. I think, for the village, we do have a portion of our community who wouldn't be able to, compete in the Lloyd's of London market or be able to be part of that insurance pool.
So I just, as a matter of information to my colleagues, I had lunch with another associate of mine in West Hampton who is an environmental scientist, and they're rebuilding about 6 miles of beach in West Hampton. And I have to think out of necessity or preemptive if there is a way of creating a cooperative underwriting, at least for the government assets, that perhaps the various municipalities can start banding together in underwriting cooperative insurance, self-insured type play. And it looks like this is going to be a necessity, notwithstanding certain federal level mandatory coverages, also to the residential market. It's almost like creating a self-advocacy for the benefit of the consumer, and to your point, the ones who can't afford these insane premiums, to create an advocacy, to create a cooperative self-insurance pool, if you will. Just because of the fact that the traditional insurance for-profit primary underwriters are just dropping markets. So, we have properties in Texas as well, so we know firsthand, whether it's Houston or Galveston or over here, what that cycle is. So perhaps, have you seen a pivot or out of necessity to create these cooperative insurances, both either municipal and or creating an environment to create a residential cooperative underwriting market? Precisely to the fact that the primaries are just dropping everybody, more or less.
So the state of California, I think, is furthest along. I think they've had their program for like maybe 15 years now. So theirs was born out of necessity to address wildfires, right? So for every particular geography, like our climate challenges are definitively different. They are having challenges now, I understand the state, with still providing insurance because they have had this repetitive, devastating loss from continued wildfires. I think there may be one other state who is also advancing a public insurance. Outside of like that public insurance for that purpose, the NFIP program, which is again the federal flood subsidized insurance program, other markets are just turning purely to that private secondary market for insurance right now. So I think there's an opportunity. I mean, I also think I honestly don't know if the village is self-insured or if you carry insurance, but I know a lot of municipalities are self-insured for their own assets. So if there was to become some interest in some public, I think there should be two things actually. One is the interest to create some cooperative or collective to provide an alternative insurance, but also, we need to do the work we talked about before, right? We need to make sure that we don't have people in high risk areas that can't afford to recover, and we also need to be securing our assets in a way that prevents us from further loss. It's both things.
Rebecca, I'm mindful of your timeline. Any other questions from my colleagues before I ask some of the tactical stuff?
No.
Michael? No? Jeannie? No. So, from a tactical perspective, if we were to take this on, two questions. From an organizational perspective at the municipal village level, you're working with the Environmental and Sustainability Committee, which I think is great. Obviously, once we get to some of these issues, which has to do with building code, you mentioned, and perhaps other code recommendations, we're probably, as a planning commission, the right venue for doing this. What is in your mind the work, or what work are you thinking of doing with the Environmental and Sustainability Committee? Where do you start? Where does it end? Where should we take it over? Things like what you were talking about to refresh these two studies thanks to this new technology. Is it their role to do it until we get those studies? How should we think about this from a project organization perspective?
I think, well, I would need to know a few more things to properly articulate a good
Fair
response.
enough.
But I'd say understanding like how the studies were commissioned and what the relationships, the contracts were in terms of those two particular pieces, but also spending some time ensuring that anything that was recommended in those two studies was walked over into a comprehensive plan recommendation fully, and then it is going to be incorporated into the code. And I know you guys are doing code adoptions now, so probably sooner than later we should take a look at those studies and see what the avail is. I'd also love the opportunity, and it's working with commission members or the Climate Action Committee or your planner, to look at some of the risk modeling that's available for municipalities on a subscription basis and just walk through that, see how it looks, see how you could apply it. I think there's tremendous creativity there, and how you would and how we could use this to look at whatever planning efforts you have, even looking at applications coming into the village for new uses. So I think there's a couple different pieces here that we could work on.
All right, that's helpful. And is that something you would do with the Environmental Sustainability Committee? Or would you want the Planning Commission there? How do you think, or, I mean, you don't have to answer it. You can always say, I'll think about it. But I'm curious, in terms of the various groups, so that it's organized and not chaos, so we get to where we want to get, how to organize it from a tactical perspective.
Yeah. Who is the keeper of your planning documents, right? It's your planner in the village, right?
Well, it's the planning director, Alex Wallach, yes.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think, and I know Alex, I'm happy to start to work with Alex directly to sort of see what he's already worked through and what's left, and to support him, and then have that be part of a role, I think, on the Environment Sustainability Committee, or supporting them, because I'm not a committee member. I think I'm just supporting you all, or whomever. So however it makes sense, I'm happy to work with Alex as a start, and then work in reporting those committees on what the status is. But also, I do have experience with the state and federal grant work, and so as I'm working through other projects and seeing things available, happy to make recommendations on how to run with certain funding sources that are available, as well as sort of coordinate like an intermunicipal opportunities where there's a benefit both, let's say, to the town, the village, or the county for funding that's available.
Okay, it's very helpful. I'm mindful of your schedule. It's 5:59. I would like to maybe recommend that we have this discussion once you circle back with the planning director as well as the Environmental Sustainability Committee, and have a quick discussion on where we are at our meeting of December 5th, the first Thursday of December. December, yes. Because next November 7th, we're going to be talking about water quality and have the co-CEO of the Suffolk County Water Authority with us. So I'd like to circle back on these mitigation plan that you're thinking about on the 5th of December, if that's okay.
That's great. Yeah,
and it gives us 2 months to sort of map out from a project perspective, tactically, how we're going to achieve our vision from a strategic perspective. So thank you for your time. It's 6 o'clock. I promised you'd be off the screen by 6. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it. Bye-bye, Rebecca.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Okay, I hope this was useful. Let me then go back to the agenda, which I have here. So as far as the roll call, well, here, as far as approving the minutes, Jeannie, you're now in charge of our minutes, making sure that we read them and edit them within 15 days after each meeting, right? So thank you for that. Do you want to make a motion to approve the minutes from the meeting of the September Planning Commission?
Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from the last planning commission?
I've read them and I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Very good, thank you. And is that process working well since we put this in place a couple of months ago? That's a good way to do it. Okay, that's awesome. Great. Thank you for your work and thank you for Jolie, who puts in a lot of effort to make sure that these get right. Oh, she does, yes. Okay, let's go through preliminary report updates. And we're going to talk about Project Diamond. And Michelle is going to update us until as to where we are since we last discussed this in a brief, briefly. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Christian. The project continues. We have meetings regularly with Diamond, and we have an all-hands meeting with the village administration, including the mayor, in the next few days. The next steps are to finalize the lease agreement. It's being reviewed by Eileen Powers, the village attorney, and the in-house attorney of Diamond Communications. After that, we have to agree upon a preliminary tower location, which will be part of a process, including public hearings. And as you heard Rebecca, the visual inconvenience versus the avoiding loss of life is one aspect of this very complex siting project. After that, after the ground lease agreement, we have to prepare the site sketch exhibits. We have site engineering. We have geotechnical testing and reports. We have some regulatory steps, including title review, environmental study, NEPA and SHPO tribal studies and approvals. We have SECRA, which is State Environmental Quality Review Act approval. Then we have to order the tower and manufacture the tower. We have the permitting, final drawings, zoning process, balloon test. You can imagine what that looks like. We have the complete final construction drawings. We have building permit application and approval. And then we move on to construction phase, which includes site preparation, tower work, site components installation, site restoration, final testing, and then management and admin phase. And all this should take, if everything goes smoothly, a year. Voila.
Michelle, thank you. So I know you're looking at a Gantt chart. I've seen it. Basically, if everything goes well, including, of course, the very important public hearings to have our residents understand why this is done, how it's done, and have everybody's input in terms of the location. Where does this put us a year from now? I think the Gantt chart, doesn't it put us to not a summer 25 result, but probably, what is it, a fall, what is this? September 25. So as any Gantt chart, it always slips. So this is a end of 25 project if we really work this well. But from a project management, we really are on top of it, but we really need to start this fall some of the public hearings and discussions on all that. Okay, great. Thank you for that. I'll move on to the next topic, which is Business Revitalization Committee. We have Jeannie Strulas from the Planning Commission, who's working with Eldon Scott and the rest of the committee members. Love to hear what they're up to, and you can certainly advertise an exercise, which is the current October, the Oktoberfest, which is an effort from the village to bolster what we'll call the shoulder season, to get people to come in our village and enjoy what the village has to offer and possibly shop. So, Jeannie, thank you for the update.
It's a very quick update. Yeah, we are brainstorming on other ideas for the shelter season, but the next, we're trying to set up the next meeting sometime in October, right after the Oktoberfest. And one of the things that came out of the last meeting was the need for like a central website, so to speak. So we're looking at potentially developing that and identifying people that can help do that.
Okay. We talked about maybe joining forces somehow with the local press. Where are you guys with that?
So we communicated, and he's really busy until the middle of October, so he said to reach out then.
Okay.
See what happens.
All right. You wanted to ask a
Just
question?
curious how this. I used to be a member of the Southampton Chamber as well. I mean, are they not
Yes. they're-
assisting, or are they collaborating with you?
Yeah,
Okay.
there's somebody on the committee.
Because my wild guess would be is that as you expand membership, that would be the aggregating website to champion different businesses, or you want to create another website?
That's what we're trying to figure out.
Okay.
It sounds like, I mean, if the goals are the same, then there's no reason to, reinvent the wheel, but I think we need to flesh that out a little bit more.
Okay. There's no other questions. Thank you for that, Jeannie, and thank you for all the work you're putting in. I know you're keeping all of these people on task and moving this along. So great to have you as championing this project, so we could finally get somewhere with it. Update on deer management effort to secure more sites by Michael Anderson. And I know Mr. Michael Tessitore was in this room presenting not too long ago. I think not at the last board meeting, but the one, trustee board meeting, but the one prior. Maybe you could quickly report on that and tell us where we are.
Sure.
Thank you, Michael.
Yep. Well, as you said, Michael was here presenting his deer management plan for the village, something that he wrote. Took quite some time to write, and we did rewrite it 3 or 4 different times. The DEC was quite involved with the writes and rewrites. The DEC did want the mayor and trustees to approve this plan, which is why Michael was here. A vote was taken that night to approve the plan. So through a lot of hard work, we successfully have completed this deer management plan for the village, and we are one of the only villages on Long Island to have one. This does allow us to go to the DEC and ask for different tools that we could use to try to minimize the herd that we have in the village. So it really is great that we did this. It was one of the goals he and I tried to set out for this year. And instead of ending the hunting season in February, we will now be able to go through March and hopefully get a lot more deer than we have in the past. As far as the hunting season did start, October 1st. So far, we have done quite a few. We are on 36 properties right now. We have been successful as far as getting a few deer so far. And the more properties we get, and I can't stress this enough with my fellow members and with the public, to get as many properties as we can, the more successful we'll be. There's somebody in the audience here who did help me obtain 3 new properties on Halsey Neck Lane, and I got one off of Murray Lane. So I just need people on this board. I need support from the people on this board to get me as many properties as possible. I gave everybody a wish list of the properties that we wanted, and I just need your help. And that's all.
So we have a spreadsheet which was sent to planning commission members, so you can see which sites we really would like. And if you know some of these people, obviously that's what Michael is referring to help Michael Anderson and Tessitore, who's running this deer management program to get access to those sites. That's really important for us to be successful. And if you don't know the answer, but you know somebody in the village who might know the answer, be great to ask around so that we can have a successful program. Clearly, both Michaels have been trailblazers in Long Island to get this deer management master plan drafted and adopted by the Board of Trustees, which is great. So thank you for that. And really, at the end of the day, it'll allow us indeed to get more permits outside the season, so extended a bit from DEC permit specific tags that could be used in the month of, what is it, April? Is that right?
Yes, but the trustee and the mayor, they don't want us hunting after March because of people coming in April.
Okay, got it. So hold on a second. Let me understand this. So the season is basically October 1st till March 31st, right?
Yes.
5 months. DEC permits specific tags awarded from the DEC resulting from this master plan. What do we do with those? What's the use then?
I'm sorry?
What is the use of these DEC permits if we're not going to do anything outside the actual season?
Well, no, our season would end in February normally.
Okay, so I got it. So I'm sorry. So the season is October 1st till March 28th.
That's correct.
And so it's for March that we're actually lobbying the DEC with demonstration that we got a real plan in place, articulated and voted by the trustees to get those permits to act in March, so we have a successful season.
Longer
season. Got it.
Yes.
Okay, helpful. Thank you.
Just, Michael, an observation. I know we briefly spoke about it at the prior meeting. We were contemplating doing a one-page appeal, maybe with the village graphics department, or we don't have any consent from our village trustees yet to continually to get your message out there versus silo efforts.
I know you brought this up last meeting, and I thought at that time I told you that we've approached the trustees and the mayor several times about doing something like that, and they're not.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. There's nothing else on that. Next month, we're going to have SCWA presenting. So thank you, Jacob, for setting this up. Can you just briefly explain what we're trying to achieve by bringing this presentation from the SCWA so the public understands it, gets excited to show up on November 7th, I think it is, in this room or via Zoom or television to watch what the SCWA management has to say? Share that with us. Be great.
Well, I would imagine for the prior 3 or 5 fiscal summer seasons, the Suffolk County Water Authority had posted a very interesting ad categorized as the water hogs of some of the largest water usage residential properties in the communities. And needless to say, that's a pretty sensitive subject matter because at the peak season, when we don't have necessarily the type of rain we need, the aquifer typically gets stressed, especially with some of these larger properties that are, of course, vital to the village economics, causes a innate strain to the water aquifer. So what we have suggested together, I think, within our commission, and I thank Christian for allowing me to do that, is to invite Suffolk County Water Authority in, make a presentation, and crystallize what their concerns are and take advantage of updated building management solutions that could reduce the water usage impact. And not just for the 10, 20, 30, 40,000 square foot assets, but even for most of us other smaller property homeowners as well. So see if we can create a convergence of best practices to safeguard our much needed freshwater supply.
Thank you for that. I also would like to flag that on Saturday, October 19th, I think it is, The sewer task force will be presenting in this room at 10 a.m. I think at 10 a.m. Yes, a sewer presentation. And what's interesting from this, and how I was thinking about what you were talking about, Jacob, and the SCWA, which I'm not sure the sewer task force has spent time on this, but the water that comes from the sewer plant, be interesting to recycle it so that people could use it for irrigation, so that it's actually saved in a productive way. A lot of other countries, especially in Europe, do it. They have a double meter. You can for water for your irrigation and water for your consumption. It makes a difference, and it's a better use. I don't know if the sewer folks have spent any time thinking about this, and it'll depend on the final design and location they find. But I certainly would like to put that on the table. Is anyone going to go to the 19th October? I can't. Is anyone from this commission going to go to that?
I'd love to go, but I thought it was this Saturday or
It's October 19th, Saturday. Anybody going to be around for that?
I'll try. Yeah.
So
that is an important.
I'd love, yeah. We should at least one commit. I was scheduled for it, but I'm not doing it. I can't. And but I'd like one of us to go. Yeah, okay, be happy to do that. And certainly a village resident should be aware of this. This will be October 19th in this room, where there'll be a presentation on the sewer. Its vision, mission, and where they are and what needs to be done.
I'll also reach out to Daniel if they can make that as an added line item on best practices of water.
Yeah,
usage
because
as
as
well.
I said, I've seen it elsewhere, and it's an interesting proposition to think about. All right, just moving on to our agenda. Let's see. Other projects to consider. Are there anything this planning commission, as you think about life and think about things that this planning commission could be doing? Is there anything that jumps out that we should be spending time on?
Well, has the mayor or trustees approached you with any ideas that they might have?
Unfortunately, for now, 3 administrations, they never do. I always have to go there and ask. So it's really up to us to be thinking about them. But yeah, it should work that way. We are working for them.
It does work.
But we got to wait for them. We got to propose things for them to think about, for us to work on. Okay. So, but thank you for reminding us. But do you have anything you would go to a trustee and say, hey, I'd love us to work on it? What do you think?
Nothing as of now, no. I don't
Okay.
have anything new.
All right. And we all have a lot to do as it is in the various projects that we are working on. Is Alex Wallach on the call to update us or not? No, don't see Alex. Okay, so he's not with us today. So I'd like to open it now to public comments and discussion, either online if there are people who want to raise a hand, or in the public if there are anybody who wants to. I'm sorry? No? Okay. And here in the room, anything that anyone wants to share or questions? Thank you. All right. So we will adjourn this meeting, mindful that today is another day of Rosh Hashanah with Seder's tonight. So before the sunset, I will certainly make a motion to adjourn this meeting and schedule our next meeting, which will be Thursday, November 7th, in this room at 5:30. And we'll have the pleasure to talk to the management of Suffolk County Water Authority at that time. So no further ado, I'll make a motion to close the October Planning Commission meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
All right.
Thank you. And thank you for participating, everyone.